Intro to Ecology. Starting off with our definition. Ecology is the study of organisms and their interactions within the environment. In ecology, we have ecological levels of organization. These are listed from the largest, which is the biosphere, to the smallest, which is population. After population, we then get down to individual organisms. Our biosphere, this is the region of Earth that supports life. This includes everything that lives on the land, as well as underneath it, like earthworms that live in the dirt. The water, there's fresh water and salt water, and the air. There are some organisms that live in the atmosphere. Slightly smaller than the biosphere are biomes. These are regions characterized by their temperature and precipitation patterns. So how hot or cold it is, how much rain they get would be precipitation, and when do they get that rain. Examples of biomes include things like the desert, tropical rainforest, savanna, grasslands, tundra, taiga.
Do we have to do the little box on the right side?
You don't necessarily have to put it in the box, but yes, you need this information. Then within a biome, we'll find ecosystems. This is the location including the biotic, so the living factors, and the abiotic, or the non-living factors. So examples, we could have a lake ecosystem. The ecosystem of Medina Lake would be how much water there is, the quality of the water, and then what type of animals and plants are living in Medina Lake. Forests and wetlands are also other types of ecosystems. Our eco-model represents an ecosystem. It's a separate ecosystem from the ecosystem of the classroom. Then we've got community. This is all the biotics, all the living factors in an ecosystem. So examples would be all the trees, plus the wildflowers, plus the bees, plus the owls, plus the squirrels. This would be a forest ecosystem. Then we have population. So this is all the members of a particular species. So in that forest ecosystem, we might go through and count how many owls there are. That would be our owl population. To be considered a species, individuals must be able to breed and produce fertile offspring. And so fertile means that their offspring can reproduce. There are some animals like horses and donkeys where they can breed and produce an offspring. The horse and a donkey mate, their offspring is called a mule. Only mules are infertile. They're all females and they cannot reproduce. So horses and donkeys are separate species. When we look at populations, we also look at their niche. Populations can occupy a niche within a community, which means they are performing a specific role or occupying a space that benefits the whole ecosystem. So bees pollinating flowers is an example of their niche. They help the flowers to reproduce. Or earthworms that break down decaying matter. They're decomposers, an important role in the ecosystem. They turn nutrients to the ground. When we look at those levels of organization, we can look at energy flow, how energy moves between the levels and between organisms at each level. With a few minor exceptions, the original source of all energy is the sun. There are some deep sea habitats where they do not get any sunlight, but those are very few. Energy flow can be shown in an ecosystem using a food chain as a single path. And there's an example of a food chain here. The direction of the arrow shows the energy flow. So energy goes from our grass. Grass got energy from the sun, to the mouse, to the snake, and then to the hawk. Underneath our food chain, I have written their trophic levels. These are their different levels or steps within the ecosystem. We've got producers, then primary, secondary, and tertiary. These are all types of consumers. A food web. So mice are not the only thing eating the grass. There could be insects like grasshoppers eating the grass. A food web would show all the pathways of energy flow in an ecosystem. If we were to combine a bunch of food chains, we would then get a food web. We might see that some organisms can occupy more than one trophic level. So mice will eat grass. Mice will also eat grasshoppers. And if we were to have a food chain with the mouse eating a grasshopper, then the mouse could become a secondary consumer as well. Tomorrow we'll be looking at a food web for an ocean ecosystem. And we'll see that sometimes we won't stop at tertiary. Sometimes we can go up to a fourth order, which would be a quaternary consumer, or even a fifth order consumer, which is quintenary. On land, though, we usually stop at about the third or the fourth consumer. Is usually where land food chains will stop. Ocean food chains are more complex. Okay, our producers. Also known as autotrophs, these are organisms that make their own food. They either do this through photosynthesis, so using energy from the sun, or chemosynthesis, which is using energy from chemical reactions. Examples include plants and algae, and then some bacteria do photosynthesis. Some bacteria are also going to do chemosynthesis. Other bacteria are consumers. In our eco bottle, the little bitty dots that we saw are probably producers. We will see some larger ones though later on that will be consumers. So protists can go in both places. A consumer is something that must consume food for energy. These are going to be our animals and fungi. Again, depending on the type of protist, it could go into either category. You have to know which one you're looking at. This movement of energy, another way we can represent this are through some ecological pyramids. This is a visual of their trophic levels in energy. There's 3 types of information that we can find on a pyramid. Some pyramids will just have one of these. Other pyramids might have all 3. There's the energy, which will usually be listed in kilojoules or kilocalories. The biomass, which is the total mass or amount of living material in an area. And then the numbers, the population size. When we look at our pyramids, especially when we're looking at the energy, we're going to have what's called the 10% rule. This states that only 10% of the energy is passed from one level to the next. Most of that energy, 90% of it, is going to be lost as heat. Some of the energy is also used for life processes or metabolism, keep our organisms alive. And then some of it might be used in materials that may not be consumable. So back up here to our sample food chain. When the snake eats that mouse, there's parts of that mouse's body that it can't digest, like the bones of the mouse. So that's lost energy. Those are materials that are not consumable. Okay, this pyramid, we're going to fill one in, an example ecological pyramid. Our bottom level is always going to be the producers. The producers always have the most energy. After producers, the primary consumer, and secondary, and tertiary. And again, if you're dealing with a bigger, more complex food web, this might be bigger. You might go up to fourth or fifth. Imagine for a moment that our producers, you're told that they have 100,000 kilojoules of energy. Now our 10% rule says only 10% of that energy is passed from one level to the next. So how much energy are the primary consumers going to have? 10,000. 10,000 kilojoules. It's always important to write down the units. 10% rule does not apply to, say, the numbers or the population size. You always want to make sure you have the units. So how much energy is going to be around for the secondary consumers? 1,000 kilojoules. And then for the tertiary, 100. Okay, this is the end of the notes. come up and get those to finish it. If you are done with all of your essays, then you need to start copying down the notes on biomagnification that are taped to your table. You can also start working on those worksheet pages that you have. But I'll leave the notes up.